Hi, everybody. I am Christina Mallon. I lead inclusive design here at Microsoft. Today, we have the immense pleasure of talking about responsible AI and human-centered design with Rebekah Tweed. She is the executive director of All Tech is Human and a global leader in responsible technology. All Tech is Human works to create a world where diverse and global voices are equipped and empowered to influence the responsible development of technologies that impact their own lives and society at large. Rebekah, welcome to Microsoft Design Week. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Christina. Thrilled to be here.
Okay, so we have, it looks like a mix of researchers, designers, PMs with us today. Some will have extensive knowledge about responsible tech and some won't. So I would love if you could kick this off, really talk about the responsible tech movement, why it's critical in today's tech, and attendees, please, if you have any questions, add them to the chat and we'll hold off to the end.
Yes, Christina, that's such a great place to start. So the responsible tech movement it's a global multi-sector effort, and it's really to ensure that tech is designed, developed, deployed, and governed in ways that align with human values and with the public interest. So the movement really grew in response to a recognition that rapid technological innovation, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence and social media platforms, can produce really profound harms alongside these incredible benefits that we all know about. So rather than focusing solely on profit and speed to market and efficiency, responsible tech really emphasizes things like transparency and accountability, inclusivity, and ethics, and it brings together really diverse stakeholders across industry. We have industry leaders, policymakers, researchers, nonprofits, and really crucially, responsible tech includes affected communities to ask questions like not only can we build it, but should we build it? And also, how should we build it? So I want to share maybe 4 reasons why I think it's really critical today. So first, we know that unchecked harms are already visible. So we've seen the fallout from unregulated tech in the past. We've seen misinformation that influences democracies. There are algorithmic biases that really reinforce systemic inequalities. We have AI systems that lack transparency, and without really intentional safeguards provided through responsible technology, these harms can scale very quickly. The second reason that responsible tech is really important right now, it's crucial because of the pace of technological progress. We know it is accelerating, and tech innovation is greatly outpacing tech consideration. That's exacerbated by the current socio-political climate. You know, we have companies racing to compete with one another, and as geopolitical competition really heats up globally. So we understand the stakes are very high, and the responsible tech movement helps to close that gap by embedding risk assessments and other ethical reflections and assurance practices into development cycles. And the third thing that I think is maybe the most important reason is trust. It's the most important factor for adoption among users. So for technologies to be adopted, the public really has to trust them, and responsible tech is what builds legitimacy and provides assurance that these technological systems are actually serving society and can be adopted with confidence. And the fourth reason that's really central to my own work at All Tech is Human, I think responsible tech is really helping to shape the workforce of the future. You have this fairly new class of boundary spanning professionals, blending policy, ethics, tech, all of these skills that have emerged across different fields like responsible AI, AI governance, trust and safety, and public interest technology. So I think the responsible tech movement really creates an ecosystem. It gives career pathways and provides some training to cultivate this workforce and to ensure that tech evolves in line with democratic values and human values. So I think the responsible tech movement matters because technology ultimately is social infrastructure, and it shapes economies, it shapes cultures, it shapes democracies. And responsible tech ensures that we don't just build tools that are really powerful and really capable, but tools that actually can serve to advance human flourishing.
It's interesting because when you mentioned a lot of roles like governance roles, AI policy, how are you seeing product makers, PM, designers get this type of thinking, these guidelines into the actual product lifestyle and life cycle? I think that's the one challenge as a product maker myself, is how do we embed this and do this human-centered design when we are building AI products?
That's crucial. Within All Tech is Humans global community of over 50,000 people, there are a really strong contingency of product folks who maybe entered the field through another discipline, but have found themselves able to take the responsible tech tools and foundation that they have to apply toward product. And I think your question, it's so excellent. It goes to the heart of how do we operationalize responsible AI? So the process does start before any code is even ever written. It starts with inclusive problem definition. So, you do that by involving diverse communities, diverse disciplines, and geographies when deciding even, what problems AI should address. So one thing I think is very helpful, you can utilize community advisory boards and also host participatory design workshops. And that can help surface some of these issues really early in the process. I do want to say some really great work has been done in this space by Data and Society. And I'm especially a fan of Meg Young and her work on their Algorithmic Impacts Methods Lab. So the second thing is representative and contextual data. So you want to ensure that the data sets that you're using reflect the demographic, the cultural, the linguistic diversity of the people who will be affected by these products. So you can do things like auditing for bias and underrepresentation. You can supplement some of those gaps with community sourced data. I do want to say Mozilla has a common voice community data set to help expand languages, and also really good work's being done in this space by Aspen Digital through their Council for a Fair Data Future. It's important to document your data provenance through model cards and data sheets. Another thing you can do is ensure that your teams are multidisciplinary. So build AI teams that blend technical expertise with social scientists, domain experts, ethicists. And then also it's important to try to empower boundary spanning roles. So people that can really translate between technical, ethical, and policy perspectives. And then another good practice is to focus on equity-centered testing and evaluation. So in your algorithmic audits, in red teaming, in other stress tests, make sure you're specifically targeting potential harms and impacts on marginalized or vulnerable groups. Another thing is to focus on transparency and explainability. So providing clear documentation and interpretability tools so that external stakeholders can understand how systems function, even if they're non-technical. Using that plain language communication can make these AI decisions accessible to non-experts. And another thing that I think is really crucial here is continuous feedback loops. So establishing mechanisms that can be like user hotlines or participatory audits, or ongoing community consultations, anything to include diverse voices that can shape these updates post-deployment, because that's a really important part of the entire lifecycle, and treat that feedback as part of the lifecycle, not as a one-off event following the lifecycle, and just building that into the process. So other things you can do, create ethics review boards and independent oversight bodies, and bringing in external assurance partners as well. I think there are just a lot of ways that that you can do this, but it's important that the stakeholders that you include actually do have authority to challenge or halt deployment if any unacceptable harms are found. And then ensuring that incentives are aligned across stakeholders. So it's helpful to actually embed accountability for diversity outcomes into KPIs, into funding decisions. So overall, it's certainly not like one single step.
Mhm.
Embedding diverse perspectives is this thread that can run through the entire life cycle, from design through development to deployment and on through to continuous monitoring.
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting, and it's something that we are trying to do across Microsoft, is this cross-discipline teams. And to do that, why we are moving fast. A lot of the work that we've done at Microsoft, it was really before the big AI wave, especially our work around responsible AI. But there is always this method of test and learn, test and learn. And I would love to understand, what have you experienced? What are some of the blind spots that people really are encountering when designing AI systems that consider the diversity of the world? Because it would just help us to understand some of the things that you're seeing as we try to put these systems in place, and get these practices in place.
Yeah, and surfacing blind spots is it's often where responsible AI adds the most value. So I'll talk about some of the most common blind spots that we hear that teams are encountering when they're trying to design AI for a diverse group of users. So a lack of local expertise and community input is a big deal. So AI is often deployed in regions where there hasn't been meaningful input from local stakeholders, and that can really lead to systems that can misinterpret context, can exacerbate inequalities, can fail to meet the needs of the people who are actually using these products. Um, and a system might technically work, but it could clash with cultural norms or religious practices or local governance structures. I think it also could just lack important contextual nuances. So blind spots can pop up when global systems are deployed if localization and co-creation isn't included. So another thing that we hear about a lot are accessibility gaps. So teams might overlook how systems interact with disabilities or neurodivergence or with aging populations, just with different groups of people. And accessibility can sometimes be added as an afterthought instead of built in from the start during the design phase. There's also a blind spot around intersectionality. So often when we're testing for things like bias, it can't be just a single category. It needs to include overlapping identities to really be meaningful. But many audits still look at these single axis disparities. I think another place to look is in the data. So we hear about issues with non-representative data sets, which we've already touched on. So training data frequently underrepresents marginalized groups or it overrepresents dominant populations, and both of those can lead to issues. Another related blind spot is assuming that technical fixes alone are enough. So teams can assume that bias can be fixed just in the data set or in the model without addressing those power imbalances and social context, even like the structural inequalities that the technology interacts with. And that can, of course, be very difficult to account for, but that all plays in. And finally, I want to mention that problems can also arise from neglecting like the post-deployment dynamics. So a lot of blind spots can emerge after release. And you have feedback loops where AI predictions can reinforce biases, like in predictive policing or in credit scoring. And there's a real lack of mechanisms to track how harms can evolve across diverse groups once the system's live. And then also how to incorporate that feedback in real time. So overall, we hear about blind spots that stem from homogeneity in teams or in data or just in assumptions across all of those. So overcoming that requires structural inclusion of diverse voices inside the development teams, but also outside through community engagement, through governance, and through more robust processes to successfully incorporate diverse feedback into these systems.
Yeah, we actually have a great question in the chat, and I know we wanted to wait, but it is really, really interesting and would love your kind of thoughts around it. But when, you see that like you're really doing some recruiting and you want to have a diverse pool of participants? How can you protect the privacy of the users who choose to participate, especially regarding the companies they work for? And how can we facilitate processes that ensure transparent communication while safeguarding their identities and characteristics, such as, being neurodiverse? Because not everybody wants to share their medical diagnoses. We see this even in the, return to the office. People haven't had to talk about this stuff, and they don't really want to talk about disabilities and different private things in their lives.
Exactly. And it's incredibly tricky to do that in a way that is protecting people's privacy, because as companies are trying to, include more diverse voices and are intentionally seeking that out, oftentimes, like you said, people don't necessarily want to be expected to disclose those things. Often what I find is that companies will partner with civil society organizations that can specialize in those types of communities, who have built an infrastructure and a network that includes people that would bring diverse perspectives from across the spectrum, and that is often how that happens. So, and I'm also finding that, like, in this climate where the political climate is more challenging, when you're looking for intentionally including more diverse voices, often tapping a third party is a safer way to do that without it being, totally broadcast how you're including all the voices that make a better product and make a better team.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. What we try to do a balance of is, how do we have the opportunity for individuals at Microsoft to provide feedback on models or products, and then bring out these external communities, because the onus shouldn't be on the employee to really identify and talk about these issues, because they're personal matters.
Yes.
Awesome. And then I'd love to understand, like, when have you seen this right? Like with this co-design, when has this really worked? We'd love examples.
Yes. So yeah, one thing I have to point out is, mentioning, like, Microsoft actually does this really well. Like, one of the products that I think is really exemplary is the Seeing AI app. It's a really powerful example of, co-designing with and for people who are blind and have low vision. And I think initially, most computer vision tools are optimized around more mainstream use cases, like tagging photos for social media, or for e-commerce, right? But by centering the needs of blind users from the start, Microsoft fundamentally kind of reoriented the product, utilizing community co-design, bringing blind users into ideation and testing and refinement, and just making it more likely that the product is going to address real challenges in daily life. And also, the product was built for accessibility and featuring real-time object recognition and text-to-speech. Those kinds of things end up enhancing usability for sighted users also. So, especially if we're in a hands-busy context. So this wasn't just an accessibility add-on. It was really, built in. Inclusive design reshaped the AI product, really pushing the boundaries of real-time computer vision and natural language processing, and kind of demonstrating that designing for the margins drives innovation for everyone. And that's a core principle of responsible tech and inclusive tech.
Yeah, and I think what was really great, and I know I wasn't at Microsoft when that happened, but it actually made me want to come to Microsoft. It is such an amazing product. And what was different there is that they really did bring in and staff the team, and had actual people with, like, that are blind and low vision working on the product. So again, you make these great products when it is centered with diverse humans. And so I'll have to say, Sakib, who worked on it, I'll tell him you're a fan.
Great, yes, please.
So we would love to really, create amazing products like Seeing AI, but there's this constant balance of, like, innovation with, your ethical responsibility when building AI tools. Like, how do you balance that? I feel like everything is moving so fast, and I feel like those two are competing against each other at times.
Totally. And that is the central tension in responsible AI. And I think it mistakenly gets seen as a binary. We're balancing the drive to innovate quickly, but we have this obligation to safeguard consumers and users of our products. But I think we do have to shift the binary mindset, because in very real ways, responsibility is a driver of innovation. And instead of treating ethics as a bit of like a speed bump, I think positioning it as a source of long-term competitive advantage is important, because, it ultimately, I think it comes down to trust and building trust with customers, and trustworthy systems attract adoption, and unethical shortcuts lead to lots of backlash and reputational harm, as well as additional regulation. So embedding these guardrails early and then building ethical checkpoints into the same sprint cycles as technical milestones, I think, alongside asking, does it work? Teams really need to ask, does it respect privacy, equity? Is it safe? And I think that prevents the retrofitting ethics later, which really is slower and it is costlier and it is more likely to block innovation. And evaluating both those intended benefits and the potential harms is really important. So I think really we're looking for a nice blend of both. And you really want to look at how like transparency and accountability can catalyze innovation. Having documentation included can really build trust and encourage collaboration. And I think it is extremely important just to have a clear accountability structure, so that responsibility doesn't diffuse across teams. And so it enables users to understand what the process would be if something went wrong. And I think that only speeds up innovation for companies. So I think that balance really means like you have to integrate the ethics into the innovation and not treat them as two competing forces. And I think the strongest AI builders really recognize that responsible innovation, is sustainable and is the most innovative way to do it.
Yeah, it's really responsible and trustworthy by design is the way to go. And I think how we're trying to look at it is that if our products aren't trusted, there'll be no diffusion. And we need to make sure that that happens so that AI can empower everyone to achieve more.
Exactly.
So, as I said, there are individuals that understand lots of responsible AI and have it a part of their daily job, and some that don't. Like, what are some things and advice that you would give designers and developers and PMs that are just starting to think about responsible AI?
Yeah. So I think I have just a few pieces of advice. I would say first, you want to shift that starting question. You don't want to ask, can I build this? You always also ask, should I build this and for whom? And I think that reframing really turns responsible AI from this afterthought into part of the whole process and into the DNA of designing the product. The second thing is understanding that every choice is going to embed a value. So from how you frame the problem to what data sets you use to how the results are going to be presented, every design decision encodes values. So make those choices explicit and intentional rather than leaving them unexamined and implicit. The third thing is to bring in those diverse perspectives early. Like I've been talking about, you can't really anticipate every risk or every use case from inside your own perspective, and including colleagues from different disciplines and inviting affected communities into co-design sessions and into the testing and the feedback loops, and incorporating that feedback is really crucial. Another thing is to use the established frameworks that are out there. You don't really need to reinvent the wheel. So getting familiar with tools like NIST's AI risk management framework, the EU AI Act guidance, these are frameworks that are out there very publicly and are very practical starting points. And then the fifth is to think about the whole life cycle, not just the launch. So responsible AI doesn't stop at deployment, and build monitoring and feedback systems so you can learn how your tool performs in the wild, especially across different groups, and treat iteration and accountability as core parts of the product lifecycle. Ultimately, the goal isn't just to make AI faster or more powerful, it's to make tech that genuinely improves people's lives. So if you use human dignity and equity and trust as your North Star, your design decisions will hold up, even as technology continues to shift and rapidly accelerate.
Love that. And I've been in contact with your organization for I've been following for over a year now, and we've been chatting, and you have so many great resources. How can they, and people like me and others that are really interested in this topic, get involved with All Tech is Human?
Thank you for asking that. It's there are a lot of ways to get involved, and we try to make it very easy for people to join and to integrate into the community quickly. So there's lots of ways to contribute. So one of the easiest ways is to join our Slack community. We have about 13,000 people across 113 countries that are all interested in responsible tech. People from around the globe. People are sharing jobs, talking through ideas, and collaborating in various ways. We like to think of our Slack community as a springboard to action in real life. You can also attend our mixers and our summits and our live stream series. We have live streams every couple weeks. So these are really excellent for networking and for learning about current issues and being a part of community discussions. We actually had one earlier today with just some great people who are working on responsible AI and child safety. So we do also have a mentorship program, and if you're new to the field, this can be a great way to get involved. If you have experience, it's a great way to mentor others and give back. And it's a really structured way to kind of grow and share knowledge. And then we also have a lot of different reports and publications. So please check out our reports. We have an annual responsible tech guide that comes out every fall. And then this is a great way to stay informed and to spread awareness about the organization and about these ideas. We try to focus on the people, organizations, and ideas of the responsible tech movement. And our most recent report that we put out, we had a collaboration with Tech UK over the summer where we did an AI assurance workshop and really focused on the business case for AI assurance and how to build trust. So those are some of the ways. Also, we do have 2 newsletters. So we have a flagship newsletter that goes out every other week. And then we also have a careers newsletter that focuses just on responsible tech careers. We do have a responsible tech job board. There are hundreds of roles across responsible AI, AI governance, trust and safety, public interest tech. And so these are some ways that you can just integrate into the community, keep up with what we are doing. And then it's also great to be proactive in that community. I think networking is such an important part of just being involved in the community. And as we are in a more and more algorithmically driven future, it's great to have that IRL connection too.
I love that. Thank you so much. And as we link back to keeping diverse communities as a core part of our product development, feel free to reach out to me. I lead inclusive design, so I can bring those communities to review sessions and ideation sessions at any time within the product development process. We love it at the beginning, though. So we have about a minute left. I want to open it up for some questions. You can raise your hand.